was really just me, a passion for local music, a couple of contacts and a credit card.
This is just such a great story. When you were backstage at 17, 18 going, I just love music.
When you're that age and you're starting a record label, like you don't really know what you're doing, but equally a naivety that allowed me to build something in my own vision.
Now, the AFR's put your net worth at the 60 to 70 million range.
How did that transition go for you? Dealing with these artists and their beliefs and their values and egos and the rest of it, how do you manage that?
Yeah, the industry in some cases has a really bad reputation. I think it's about, are we actually going to not go see Taylor Swift anymore or not go and see Fred again? The future is unknown. Maybe once we'll go see the robot DJ, but are you actually going to go see the robot every night for the rest of your life? The future of technology is actually, it's more exciting than that.
What's the best Black Mirror kind of idea in the music industry that you think is a chance of possibly happening?
Where AI is going to be great is...
What's up, guys? This episode of Unemployable is quite different to what we usually have on the show, or more specifically, who we have on the show today. As you saw from the trailer, we have Jadden Comerford, and Jadden is a young rich lister, according to the AFR, net worth somewhere between $60, $70 million, done very, very well. But what I loved about this interview is how considered Jadden is. He's a quiet achiever. He's not got an overt personality. He's very thoughtful, and he's built a business around something he loves, being music. He is a perfect example of somebody who is stuck at something they love over a period of time and didn't know at the beginning how it was all going to turn out. Only by looking backwards can you see how the dots connect in his life. And it's a really wide-ranging discussion. He basically runs a company called Unified, which is a group, like a family office of companies that are all around the music industry. One, for example, that we spoke about, which was Cusick, which is feeding music into retail chains across the country. So the retailer feeds the music through, and then they play in-store commercials, but those in-store commercials then get sold to suppliers, though, for example, people who sell products in those retail stores. There's this whole business all around that. Very, very interesting. And it does everything from event management to promoting artists to festivals and so much more. It's a really fascinating discussion. It's a very thoughtful discussion. So get yourself a cup of tea, sit back, chill out, and learn from a very, very sharp person about the power of persistence, consistency, and just being around something you love and doing the right thing by people. I know you're going to enjoy it. As always, like, subscribe, and drop a comment. What is up, everybody? Welcome to this edition of Unemployable. We are super stoked. Today we have one of Australia's most successful young entrepreneurs. He's a member of the AFR Young Rich List. And what's so interesting about this story is that he comes from the creative/tech field, which we're really curious to dive into. So for all of you souls out there that would love to build a business that's aligned with something other than just, lipstick or makeup or, all the hot, common trends that we see, e-commerce, we're going to dive into something a bit different today, which is going to be really exciting. Jadden, thank you for joining us. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing?
We're ripping really well. Eric, how are you, mate?
Good? Very good. Excited for this one.
Yeah.
Love music, man. So, I want to hear all about it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. James, how are you, mate?
Very well indeed. Looking forward to this one. It's got from the preliminary information, some good twists and turns in here, and some A-listers on the docket. So it'll be good to pull it apart.
Yeah, and you're one of those entrepreneurs, Jadden. That's kind of we were doing our research and reading about you in the paper, and it's like, where do we start with your story? But maybe you could be the best person to tell us how do you describe, if somebody was meeting you and for the first time they say, so what do you do for a living? The inevitable question. How do you actually answer that these days?
Well, I'm the CEO and founder of Unified Music Group, which is a group of companies working in and around the music industry. So that's the high level. I try to keep it as simple as possible and then essentially wait for follow-up questions. But I always make it really clear that I work in the music industry because music is ultimately my major passion and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. So Unified, like you've got all these other projects, STL, and you're sort of a sweat equity investor in Splash and a whole bunch of other things, which we'll dive into. But how does Unified make its money? What does it do as a business?
Yeah, so Unified music group is a group of companies. So yeah, they ultimately are doing their different things. So we have a record label, we have a management company, we have a booking agency, we have a marketing company, a PR company. So various different companies that all provide different services to different clients, all in and around music. And essentially Unified as either the majority shareholder or the minority shareholder or the only shareholder in these companies is obviously just making its money from doing that, and collecting that revenue per each of the individual businesses. And that flows into our head office, which is where we then provide all the services to these businesses to allow them to essentially exist within the ecosystem.
Yeah, so there's sort of like a hand in glove, like one company does one part of the, delivery landscape, and then you got other companies in the group that do other services for musicians and artists, right? That's basically it at a high level.
Yeah, like if I took all the way back to the start, which I'm sure inevitably would probably want to talk about that, like I basically finished high school in 2001 and started Boomtown Records, which was my first record label. So I was 17, turning 18. But the truth is, when you're that age and you're starting a record label, like you don't really know what you're doing. It's not like all of a sudden you're, Sony Music or something like that. It was really just me, a passion for local music, a couple of contacts in a couple of places, and a credit card that allowed me to pay to press CDs for my friends' bands and somehow figure out how to monetize them. So that was just like day one. It was a hobby. It didn't really have any intention of going anywhere. But ultimately, over the next 5 to 10 years, it became what I termed at the time an organic evolution. I didn't necessarily have a strategy to be like, okay, well, now we're going to organize gigs, and now we're going to do marketing, and now we're going to do that. It all just kind of evolved and happened in a way that was very, very natural. Fast forward to now, the company's a lot bigger. There's a lot more at stake. There's a lot more experience. There's a lot more people around me that know what they're doing. There's a lot more strategy to how we're growing the business and how we're sort of adding to that. But ultimately, yeah, started from that very, very simple idea and evolved over the last 22 years now.
I'm really curious, like when you're building kind of like a portfolio of companies, it's almost like a family office, except they're all around the same industry. They're all sort of aligned services. Did you start all of those, or do you partner with entrepreneurs and then fund them, or is it a combination of, a number of those sorts of deals that get done, like, or they were all seeded and started by you and then developed into companies from there?
Yeah, so in 2016 was when we started our first company with someone else, or we invested in somebody else. And it was basically, at the time we had a record label, we had a music festival, we had management company and a merch company, and they were all owned by us. And my wife said to me, you should stop starting so many businesses. You should just invest in other people. And I think 2 weeks later, I came home and I was like, hey, I just invested in a company. And it was kind of like, she was like, I didn't really mean it. That business was STL Tones, and it was STL Tones, an incredible success story from Central Coast, New South Wales. The business is now based in Nashville, but essentially builds software for music producers, and is just going absolutely gangbusters. We got in very early on that business, and not necessarily co-founders, but because the business was technically already existing, but we very much came on as partners very early on and helped build that business. And I guess what I learned from that experience, and once again, like a lot of these things in hindsight, I thought I was just investing. I thought I was Mr. VC coming along and putting in a check, but really we were coming on board to help build that business. That then gave me insight into, okay, well, there's a lot more than we can bring to the table than just money. We can bring our services, our network, our strategy, and all this sort of stuff, and also the opportunity to be a part of the group. And so that essentially kind of kicked off a strategy, which was, finding like-minded people who are experts in their field, whether it's PR or marketing or, this software, and investing in these people, being partners with these people and helping them build their businesses and essentially building the businesses together.
I think there'd be a lot of interest from our audience on like how those types of deals get done. And also like I read in the paper, there's no paper anymore, is there? It's digital online, but I read I think it said that it was doing $6 million a year, that particular business. That might be outdated now, but is that accurate, like the STL Tones? And I was just curious, I jumped on there and I'm trying to understand for the layman who's listening to this, who's not in the music industry, what exactly people are buying and transacting when they go to that website. Like the site looks amazing, but if I'm in the music industry, how would I use the services or products that you sell in simple terms?
STL Tones is used by musicians and producers. It essentially helps you make music in the studio. We create what are called plugins. You may have experienced plugins with other software platforms, whether it's via Canva or other different platforms where you might use a filter or you might create some kind of image in a different way. STL Tones does that for sounds. So it essentially makes your experience in the studio much more efficient and allows, I guess, a lower barrier to entry for a lot of people making music. So it's very much fueling the music industry, but it's also more broadly fueling the creator economy.
So I could come in, if I'm a music producer, listen to a particular sound that I'm trying to get, and I can just basically buy from you the file to apply that almost like a filter to my tracks to get it to sound a certain way. Is that sort of it in a broad?
Yeah, to a certain extent. It's a subscription platform. So, one of the most commonly used digital audio workstations in the music industry would be Pro Tools. So you use Pro Tools, you open up your Pro Tools, you subscribe to STL Tones, you load that up as a plugin within your Pro Tools, and then you've got a whole bunch of drop-down menus that allow you to get access to all these different sounds that you can use in your audio sessions.
So I'd like to talk a little bit, just if you don't mind, about, because you're really efficient. Obviously, you're in the young rich list. We always talk to our audience about building private equity, right? As in your own personal family equity, and you've been very successful at building your net worth through business, right, and entrepreneurship. How do you view building your net worth in that way? Like you've got a skill set that you're now got your arms around and you understand the value of what you bring. How do you identify opportunities, start discussions, and then decide what the splits are going to be when you're doing this type of deal?
Yeah, it's a great question. Whether it's right or not, everything comes back to music for me, as I've said a few times. I often say no to investments if they're not in line with music. I have investments in things that aren't music. I have, all of the sort of boring bases covered with the ETFs and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to an active investment, if it doesn't align with my views on the world, I'm vegetarian, so I don't invest in businesses that do meat, for example, not in a judgmental way, but I just have these very strict rules where I'm just I don't invest in that. I don't invest in alcohol companies. We're a major shareholder in Heaps Normal, which is a business we're really proud of. I drink alcohol, so I'm not against alcohol. I'm just there's more than enough funding out there for alcohol companies. They don't need my money. One area that is underfunded is music, and particularly music tech. So for me, I'm very much interested in how do I bring as much value and as much focus as I can to an area that I'm really passionate about, that has already done really well for me, and I believe will continues to do well for me. So it's just sort of trying to be very, very focused in that sense.
What was it about STL Tones that obviously you liked the product when you first saw it? I'd be just curious as to how you came across that deal, because I'm guessing I have no idea, you don't have to give me the specifics, but I'm sure that the return on your investment in that business is one of those outliers. It's the type of thing where you put in some money, but your returns are just massive, like a VC, for example, with a successful thing. How how do you you obviously like the product, but what was it about the founders that made you want to get involved with them? And, what did you see there when you were looking at that particular investment?
Yeah, it was so early. Like I said, it was literally like this throwaway comment from my wife. And then an opportune meeting where, so the founder, his name's Sonny, he is, but more so was a music producer. He had a studio on the Central Coast and recorded bands, and recorded a lot of bands that were sort of in and around the world that I was currently working with. And he essentially came to me to pitch, firstly, us using him more as a producer, but also it was kind of almost a bit of and by the way, I'm doing this thing I wanted to tell you about. And we're sitting in the lobby of a hotel in Sydney, and he told me about this thing, which was STL Tones. And I just remember thinking, I understand about half of what he just said. But he's awesome. He's, works with great bands. He has great instincts. He's clearly got an idea, and he was very specific of what he needed from me. He was very specific that he needed some capital, he needed some access to my network, and he needed help actually running the business. And it was very simple. It was just yeah, I can do that. It was not that different, and this is something I've talked about before. It's not that different to when we identify an artist we want to work with. We always talk at Unified, we're all about investing in talent and building careers. And so whether that's our team members, whether that's our artists, or whether that's the founders that we invest in, that's sort of the lens that we take. And because the business was such at an early stage, there was no point looking at DCFs or cash flow forecasts or balance sheets. There was no point doing any of that. It was more does this guy have an idea that's worth backing? And do we think this guy can take this all away? And 8 years in, it's not a short journey, but equally the business is doing incredibly well. And so it's definitely a decision I'm glad that I made, and one that I'm very proud of, and one that really kickstarted a strategy that is, we'll get into more.
Was that one of the earliest investments out of the portfolio within Unified?
That was the first one.
Yeah, the first one outside of your own.
That was the first business that we did that wasn't just us.
And that sort of gave you a taste for it, I guess, right? Eric and I do a similar thing. We've got about 8 companies in our little portfolio of, sometimes there's the reason we're interested. We get entrepreneurs who come on the show. Some of them are much less mature than you, but they're just sort of starting their journey. They've had some early success. They need capital and they need some mentorship. And we sort of really enjoy doing that. We love backing good people, So what kind of conversation do you have around, when you're sitting down with these guys, do they generally say, this is how much money I need and this is how much I'm going to give away? Or do you just sit down and just have a discussion and every deal is different? Or do you have a formula that others could sort of replicate in that area?
Yeah, I guess everything's different. And I think it's maybe worth jumping forward a little bit to sort of talk about how it's evolved, to give it a bit more context as well. Because in 2018, I guess we made our first investment as an angel, or as a mini VC. So, I'd started to build this conviction around music tech. I was living in the US at the time, and I was back in Australia for Splendor on the Grass Festival. And I was backstage with a couple of friends, Alex and Anthony Zachariah, who went on to start Linktree. And we started talking about how cool would it be to build something that could support the local music tech ecosystem that, barely existed at that point. And we basically went out there and found 2 companies that were based in Melbourne. One was called Muso and one was called Tixel, and we invested in both of those companies. But we invested alongside a bunch of different investors. So it was very much like your sort of traditional, round. There was a lead investor, there was a number of angels and all that sort of stuff. So that was sort of the next step in terms of me becoming an investor, but also starting to understand the different ways in which you can invest in a business. Because when you only own 0.5% of a company, you're not running their finances. You're not doing all the things that we were doing for STL Tones and for our other partners. And so what we realized was that there was 2 ways in which we could invest in companies. So I guess with that in mind, and the reason I sort of did that exercise there was to show there's even more examples where we might be approached because there's a round happening and we might invest in that, or we've been approached by founders that haven't even started their businesses yet, but presented us an idea, and together we've started that business, and that business has become successful.
I think strategically it makes a ton of sense to be sort of pegged into an industry like music, for example, that when you make an investment, you can immediately add significant value to the business aside from the cash itself. It's good for them and it's good for you. So whether it's experience and network or whatever it is, we sort of look for the same thing. What questions do you guys have at this point?
What are some of the key things you look at when you're partnering with these founders, right? I like to call them, like the jockey, the person that, because you can have an amazing idea, but if you don't have the person that's going to, commit to it and basically spend every day on it, the idea is just going to sit on a shelf, right? The idea is only as good as a person. So do you look for any specific things with these people? Because I have, like Adam and I said, we have different businesses that we invest in, different people. And there's certain things I look for. So it'll be interesting to see what you look for.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And just briefly to close the loop on that comment there, Adam, as well, like around like thematics, like, because, a lot of funds are, and we'll talk about stage at some point, but most funds, including SciStage, are sort of sector agnostic, right? Because it's particularly in a market like Australia, from a traditional VC perspective, it's too small to be too focused. But going back to what you said at the start, I don't talk about it often in this way, but Unified being almost like a family office, it's my capital, so I can decide what returns I want. And if I decide I want to work in music, then I'm okay with those returns. And so, that's something that's, I think, a good thing to call out, that like, obviously we're all trying to optimize our businesses to be as successful as possible, but it's not all just about making money. You can decide how much money you want to make ultimately.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And that, I guess, comes back to values and the way you want to live your life and all that sort of stuff. And I guess, I think you'd probably find this, but there is, everyone knows money doesn't buy happiness. After a certain point, you can only live in one house and drive one car at a time and eat in so many restaurants, and for a lot of people, different people have a different number. But I think if you live in Australia or a Western world, the number's not $100 million that you need to be, you're well and truly financially free well before then. And then after that, it becomes about meaning and purpose and the connections that you make along the way. Has that been your experience as well? I sort of get a sense you're that type of dude.
Yeah, 100%. Like we definitely do not go without, as I often say, never light a candle for me. But equally, if I wanted to make more money, I could in other industries, but I love music and it's my passion, and it's been so good to me. But yeah, Eric, I think like I loved that. I always love that analogy of like, yeah, there's the idea, then there's the execution. And we have the same conversation when it comes to artists, because I like to compare the artist and founder journey, because think about how hard an artist needs to work, particularly a touring musician. As glamorous as those tour posters look, especially the ones with European cities all over them, they're like day after day after day traveling and playing and trying not to stay up too late, trying not to, trying to eat well, trying to sleep well, all that sort of stuff. So, I guess we're looking for people. I had this amazing dinner. It was like, when was it? It's around 2012 with a guy named David Caplice. He was the original manager for Human Nature. He worked with them for many, many years. And he gave me this really great piece of advice around when you're going to go all in on an artist, and once again, this is relevant to a founder, you need to make sure they're a willing participant, because the last thing you want to be doing is working harder than they are, because otherwise, you're not going to win unless they're the ones that are ultimately doing the work, because they're the ones that are, like with STL Tones, if Sonny's not going to do the work, I can't build the technology that he's building. I can back him and help him, build more technology. But if he goes away, the vision's gone. So it's about making sure we feel like people are going to be with us for the long haul.
Yeah.
Just with STL Tones, as you said, it's probably your first investment, a JV investment, but more so in the music tech sector. What does that look like? You said it's going extremely well now from an 8-year-old company to where it is. What's the lead generation model, or is it viral in nature, and how does it attract producers to STL Tones over another piece of software that I'm sure there's plenty of in this sector?
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of points of difference. There is some specific differences in the technology, but that would probably get a bit hard to explain. One of the insights that Sonny had that was probably the main thing that sold me and part of the reason why he wanted my help was what we actually do is within the plugin, you get access to the sounds of other producers. And these are like, world famous producers. So you're wanting to make a guitar sound that sounds similar to how Green Day did it on a certain record or Metallica or something like that. We've gone and licensed those sounds from those producers and given access to our clients, our customers, to be able to use them. And so because we've got a relationship with those producers, it's exclusive. So none of our competitors have that exact same product. So that sort of makes the product unique. And then otherwise, you guys talked about e-commerce, but our advertising and marketing strategy is very similar to an e-commerce strategy where, often we're constantly measuring our LTV to CAC ratio and making sure it's, in the right space and, trying to spend as much money as we can on, growing those customers and limiting churn and all the sort of the basic metrics. So it very much operates like that. Even though it's a subscription business, we still operate those similar metrics.
I've got a secondary question to that. With it comes into one of the other companies underneath Unify, which is a record label and also a management. So is STL Tones a bit of a lead generator for actual talent? Is that where you're sort of mining the pool to get the best in the business on board?
That's a good question. Some ways it's the other way around. I guess it can go both ways ultimately, and that's really what kind of the value of the ecosystem is. We want everyone to run their own race and not feel like they've got to essentially, report back into head office or something like this. But at the same time, like finding those collaborative and synergistic opportunities across the businesses is like, that's a huge value add that we try to provide to our partners. And selfishly, we get a huge amount of value from that.
Yeah, it's kind of reminds me a little bit. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years, and the tenant in the building opposite where my animation company was Live Nation, and they were kind of like a one-stop shop. And I used to go in there quite a bit actually, and you'd see all the comings and goings of everything that they did. And that was kind of it's a business that's brought together all of these services under one roof. Really, is that kind of right, isn't it?
Yeah, like Live Nation at the peak of that, really, like, they're the biggest. I think Universal might be bigger market cap, but like from a live music perspective anyway, like Live Nation are the biggest, concert promoter in the world, and what they've done to integrate their businesses is incredible, almost too good, I think, because the Department of Justice is suing them for monopolistic activities, which I think is a compliment in some ways. But yeah, I guess where we're different though, and this is where my interest in investment comes in, is that, there is a world where I could rewind and do this all over again and own everything 100% and build this sort of monolithic business. But I guess I very much tried to prioritize this idea of investment and partnership and empowering others to sort of build within our ecosystem. So we're not a VC fund, but we're sort of looking a little bit more like that than like a really big company.
Almost like a distributed workspace, like a WeWork of music, where you can get funding, support, and access to aligned companies to help you grow in a way. That's sort of, it's an interesting idea. I think it's, and I love that at the heart of it are people who love music, What's been just as a sideline, like I read the Clive Davis book, I think a year ago, as a music manager. Like, what makes somebody great in your opinion as a manager in your business? Like you talked about working with artists, and artists they're interesting souls, right? They're creative, they're free-spirited, they're going to be emotional. The best of them are probably in that. How do you manage somebody really well in that space and collaboratively and share the wins and build a great relationship? Because I think it'd be overlap with business entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, management is one of the most fascinating parts of the music business. And trying to think of who the most famous managers are in the world. We've got like Malcolm McLaren, who managed the Sex Pistols, and Peter Tong, who managed Led Zeppelin back in the day. There's an incredible book called Sex, Guns, and Rock and Roll. Because back in the day, I think it was mostly in the UK, but, because when we do a concert, the tickets are sold through Ticketmaster or someone like that. And, the second the show finishes, the settlement happens, the money gets paid through automatically. But imagine selling out an arena in the 70s in, I don't know, Manchester. You're literally picking up a bag of cash. So these guys would literally carry guns to get paid. So I'm not saying that we're so far from that, it's not funny. But equally, the reason I tell that story is that such a part of the manager's job is to protect and represent the artist so they can be their best self. And so management is one of these jobs that's can be super lonely as well, because you kind of you're there to cop everything that goes wrong. And if you're lucky, get a pat on the back when things go well. And it's not that you're underappreciated, just that while something's going well, you're already on to the next thing. So you don't really have a lot of time to stop and breathe. But for me, it's one of the most fulfilling parts of working with an artist, because you really are, in a lot of cases, getting in at the beginning of their career and helping them build, and then getting to, enjoy those journeys, those moments along the journey with the artist.
Did you you mentioned the festival company, so you've got the management aspect, you're managing an artist, then obviously you've got to put a tour on for them. With that festival company, how did it sort of fare up through COVID? What was the pivot at that point?
Well, it was, especially in Australia, it was pretty tough on the live music front. It was almost non-existent for most of, the lockdowns. We had to be patient. We did make a couple of pivots. There was a law in Victoria where we were allowed to do up to 5,000 people outdoors as long as they were sitting down. So we did a bit of brainstorming. We're like, who's going to sit down? We're not going to have a heavy metal concert with people sitting down. So we decided to do a country music festival. And so for the last 3 years, we've run a country music festival in Eastern Victoria. People don't have to sit down anymore, but people love sitting down at events like that anyway. They bring their camp chairs, and it's sort of a whole thing. So that was kind of like an example of a pivot where we ran that first event in April of 2021, which was still very much in COVID. So that was definitely a moment where I was pretty proud of the team, to be able to ideate and pull something like that together in pretty challenging circumstances.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different aspects to what you're doing, and those music festivals, we used to do live events, and it's such a challenging business because there are so many risk factors, right, with weather and people getting sick, and we've all probably seen Fire on Netflix, the Fire Festival.
Yeah,
and,
I love that one.
That was a ripping documentary, which I'm sure you probably sat back with popcorn and laughed at that one. But there has been such a rise, or there was such a rise in that whole music festival scene. Has it bounced back strongly after COVID? Is it going better now? How is it now, the industry?
It came back really strong, and it's now it's feeling the pinch. I think like a lot of industries, I think, discretional spending is down. We've got interest rates and all these sorts of factors. There's there's a few other major ones, but there's the cost of putting the events on has skyrocketed, probably similar to how maybe the construction industry feels it. The dollar is pretty weak compared to the US dollar, so we're struggling to bring out the international artists to play festivals because a lot of these international artists are just coming out and playing their own shows. So whether that's Taylor Swift or Fred again, or all these various artists that are doing these massive shows and tours. Festivals is probably the area of the industry we're the least exposed with. I love festivals. I love going to them. I love putting them on from time to time. But just the risk versus return is just not aligned with how I like to bet. And as you said, there's just so many of them now. So it's definitely in a bit of a correction phase right now, probably coming off the back of maybe having too many festivals.
Yeah, you're not alone there. We get all kinds of guests on this show, from retailers to all kinds of B2C businesses, and we are hearing that across the board, that there's definitely a softening in discretionary spend in a lot of spaces. So all the listeners out there, if you're running a business and you are feeling the pinch a little bit, here you are hearing it again from somebody who's doing quite well in the Australian business landscape. It's not just you. It's all of us. We're all in the same boat. Eric, you got something?
I've got a good friend. He's actually my business partner's brother, and I've known him for many, many, many years. And you'll know who he is, Ziggy Alberts. Now, Ziggy obviously has his own record label, and he's a unique character himself. Now, dealing with obviously these artists and their beliefs and their values and egos and the rest of it. How do you transition from trying to get a person, that wants to back themselves and think, oh, I'm the artist, I've got the value, to then have a discussion with someone like you that has a record label, which I'm assuming in that industry, from documentaries that you've watched and listened to over the years about the artists feeling like they've been ripped off by the record label and they've taken all my money and I'm broke now. How do you manage that, to try and, when you're sitting down with these artists that are going to be, trying to be the next, Taylor Swift or whoever, how do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, we actually work with Ziggy. We do all of his tour. Yeah, we do all of his touring. I love Ziggy. I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah, he's such a good guy.
Great personal relationship with him and his family. So yeah, he runs a family business. Like his sister manages him, his cousin does the marketing, his dad does the finance. They're amazing family, so inspiring. Look, I think there's no doubt the industry has a reputation for people that carry guns and do crazy shit, like the story I told before. And it's an industry that back in the CD days, really benefited from creating a very complex sort of way in which royalties flowed through to artists. And then when the digital world came along, it was sort of like a field day for the companies, because they were able to kind of, I don't know, maybe not intentionally, but the way the accounting systems were set up, there was just money being lost and missed and paid into the wrong places. So as a result, the industry can in some cases has a really bad reputation. The benefit for a company like ours is we're a first generation, internet native company. So we're able to explain very easily that that's not us and that's not how we do business. I'm sure we've done business with artists that haven't had great experiences that might, disagree with me. But I think by and large, we've got quite a reputation being forward thinking. So,
hey guys, hope you're enjoying the pod. I just want to take a quick moment to share a quick story with you about something going on in one of my businesses right now. We are using artificial intelligence to send a voice clone of myself directly into our customers' voicemail inboxes the moment after they purchase our product. Well, not the moment, a few minutes after. So with our toilets business, Dry Flush, people put in their name, their email, their phone number when they order the toilets. 5 minutes later, their phone rings once and it goes straight to their voicemail. And we're using an AI that clones my voice and says, "Hey, Terry," if that's their name, grabbing the name from the order form using my voice. It drops a customized voicemail to say, "Hey, Terry, what's going on? Adam here from Dry Flush. Just want to say thank you so much for ordering one of our toilets. Sorry I missed you. I just wanted to let you know that we appreciate your business. If there's anything you need, just send us an email at hello@dryflush.com.au. And that goes out to every customer every time a few minutes after the purchase. This is what the team at earlybird.ai are building for us right now, as along with some other very, very cool solutions that are going to increase customer experience, increase the number of 5-star reviews we get, and automate the amazing experience that we are aiming to provide when you buy from our e-commerce store. So if you want to learn about that and your business is doing over $500,000 a year, you qualify for a free audit with the team at earlybird.ai. That's EARLI, earlybird.ai. And they will do an audit of your business and show you how they can put artificial intelligence like that into your business, whether it's voice cloning, video, face cloning, all kinds of amazing technologies that are available right now. So go over there, get your free audit, and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I think it's about being really honest, right? Like, because as much as like, not to, sell out Ziggy, like Ziggy's an independent artist, but it's not like Ziggy's doing all the work. Like he's got a whole team of people, in the same way Taylor Swift is an independent artist, but she has, a whole staff working on her business. So you need someone to help you do stuff. I always say the example of like, you can do your own tax return. You could service your own car. I'm sure you could watch a YouTube tutorial and figure out how to service a car. Like I'd struggle massively. But I'm sure you could figure it out, right? But you're probably better off just taking your car to the mechanic and getting them to do it in the same way that you could manage yourself, or you could work with an expert. So I think we very much just try to present ourselves as the experts, as the professionals. We're not like uncool, but equally we're not the cool guys that are like hanging out with you all night at the party to try to woo you. We're actually more interested in wooing you with strategies and like business fundamentals and showing that we can actually help you have a career. That goes a lot further, I think, than gifts and like stuff that sort of can be very of the moment and not necessarily have any sort of real benefit to the artist's career.
Yeah, it's interesting because like someone like Ziggy, he's so much about family and values, and it's never been about the money, for someone like him. But then I'm sure a lot of artists are all about the money, right? So they're going to be looking at who's the going to pay me the highest ticket, I guess, right? And just managing that. Now you mentioned before about CDs. Now, how was the actual transition? Because obviously 22 years ago you started, 18 years old, as you said before. What was the transition from CDs to how music is now played and distributed? How did that transition go for you?
Yeah, it was so fascinating. Like if I reflect on my timing of entering the industry, like probably couldn't have been better for me anyway. I got a chance to see what the old world looked like. But the stakes were so low for me that like as Napster really started to take over through, really the time that I was entering, all the major labels were making redundancies and, cutting budgets of signings and all this sort of stuff. But none of that stuff affected me because I didn't have an office. I didn't have a staff. I wasn't really paying out huge costs. I was just doing very simple things to help local artists. So I then got introduced to iTunes in around 2006 when it launched in Australia. And that was sort of the first time that we really started to monetize digital music. So people would download songs and albums. And then I distinctly remember in about 2011 being in New York and going to Spotify for the first time. And, being explained to this idea of, people are going to subscribe and stream music and all this sort of stuff. So that was sort of like three pivotal moments in my career where I sort of was able to, over as a period of 10 years, like transition through. It hasn't been without its challenges. The benefits of CDs and then also in turn digital downloads was there used to be a huge like first week mentality with the release of music. So you would put out an album and the majority of the sales would happen in the first week. So you might have outlaid $100,000 on marketing and production and stuff, and you're most likely going to make that back really quickly. Whereas with the way streaming works, and I don't know about you guys with your music collections, but like I'm constantly just listening to music over and over again or going back to things. And so the money that's being generated by the industry isn't all just happening at one time. It's happening very slowly over a longer period of time. So it really changed the way the cash flow of the music industry worked. but I think ultimately has created a much bigger opportunity for artists and for businesses to be able to more cost effectively release music, reach global audiences, and also better understand the data, because when you sold a CD back in the day, you knew what shop you sold it in, but you didn't know what it did after that. Whereas I can see today what a certain song is streaming in Brazil and understand, what the opportunity might be in that market.
Now, with platforms like iTunes and Spotify, how do the artists actually get paid? Right, like obviously you go put a CD on a shelf, you buy the CD. Obviously, the CD company, HMV is an example, where I don't know if you guys had HMV here, but that's where I used to buy all my CDs in Canada. Obviously, they get a percentage, and then a percentage will go to the artist. How does the actual payment terms work?
Yeah, so the basic streaming model is a pro rata model. So they collect the revenue, this is the monthly subscription amount, and they divide it by, Eric, you got 1% of global streams, you'll get 1% of the revenue. And there is some contention around that model, because if you think about how that works, if all Adam listens to is an artist that isn't in that one, Adam only listens to one artist and no one else listens to that artist is most likely going to get next to nothing. So why does Adam spend $11.99 this month and listen to James's band and he hasn't got any of the money? So the way the pro rata model works definitely benefits the bigger artists and in terms the bigger companies. So there's all sorts of conversations at the moment happening around different ways in which they're calling it the user-centric model. So how it can actually attribute how someone streams music to how their subscription gets paid through to that content. There's a company called SoundCloud that are experimenting with that. But yeah, it's like streaming's, pretty much 10 years old now, or a little bit older than that. And it's definitely starting to hit a maturity phase. And it's, it's a multi-billion-dollar revenue driver for the industry. I think we're going to see a lot of changes over the next couple of years in terms of how that money gets paid out.
Cool.
Yeah, very interesting.
You mentioned before, just going back to STL Tones, it started on the central coast of Australia, and now it's headquartered in Nashville. So overall, with the Unified Music Group, what's the footprint like here in Australia compared to the US, as far as like a revenue split, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good question. We definitely over-index in the US, like based off, we've got about 10 people in the US, and we've got about 40 people here in Australia, rough numbers. But we definitely over-index over there. It's such I'm sure you guys have got experience in doing business over there. It's one of those markets where obviously it's a more expensive barrier to entry, but the opportunity to earn revenue in such a big market is just so much greater than it is here.
That's just in STL Tones you're talking about, right? That.
No, our entire business. If you could look at the traditional music business side of things, I always use the example of, you see a tour of Australia, there's probably 5-6 shows, maybe Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth, maybe the Gold Coast if you're lucky. But you see a tour of the US, it's 40 shows, 50 shows. So you've just got such a bigger opportunity to earn revenue over there.
Yeah, I just meant from a staffing point of view. That's the split for the staffing for that particular company. 10 and...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, STL only has one person. Yes, only one person in Australia. The rest of the team's based in the US.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Yeah, what I love about this story is, there's a lot of young people listening to this, and what I think about when I see a business like yours or hear a story like yours, was that correct? Was it 22 years you've been doing this now? 20?
Yeah, technically I'm 40, so yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing how lucky you get when you do something for 20 years, right?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Return on
So, what I love about this is there's sort of an artistic heartbeat to what you're doing. Like you genuinely started with a love of music, and you sort of leaned into what you're good at and you doubled down on your passion. And I guess, were you naturally good at the business side of this when you started, or did that just evolve? Did you always have that entrepreneurial flair?
It's a good question. And like, I think like any good entrepreneur, like I don't necessarily think I'm that good at business. I think I could be a lot better. But I grew up in a family that valued business, not necessarily like huge businesses. Like my dad had a plumbing business that him and mum ran, and then he eventually got involved in Baker's Delight, and trained to be a baker and owned 2 bakeries here in Melbourne. And similarly, mum's dad was in business, and so I was always very fascinated by the idea of like kind of getting out what you put in, and having an idea and executing upon it. So always valued those sorts of things. But yeah, I think I definitely had to learn a lot. Like I probably about 10 years ago, I started really filling up my bookshelf with business books, and started getting into podcasts, and started going to talks and conferences where I could, to try to learn not just the music stuff, but actually try to learn about business and how it actually works. Because when I started getting into like particularly more the VC stuff, someone said to me, "Oh wow, so you bootstrapped your entire journey?" And I literally said, what does that mean? I didn't realize what I was doing. I thought I was just running a business. I'd never even considered the idea of raising capital. So there's an example of like massive, a massive amount of naivety, I guess, but equally a naivety that allowed me to build something, I guess, in my own vision.
Yeah, I love that, and that's sort of what I'm getting at for the listeners here, especially the young people, the young Aussies. Like, you're not an old man. Like, you're 40, you're still young, right? Like, you've got so much ahead of you. But for the listeners out there, I really feel for the millennials coming through, because the world's changing so quickly that you don't know where. It's hard to plan forward because everything's changing so fast. And with the advent of AI, you're sort of not sure what degree you should do, if the industry is even going to exist when you finish the 4 years. But I would imagine that you would probably exemplify the Steve Jobs quote that you can only connect the dots in your life looking backwards. Like when you were backstage at 17, 18 going, "I just love music." I think about it from economic value. The AFRs put your net worth at the 60 to 70 billion range, and that's probably just a guess based on valuations and all that sort of stuff. But when I think about if that's in the ballpark, the economic value of the group overall that has been created over this period of time from Melbourne, from being an Aussie in a relatively small country, and all the jobs that have been created, this is just such a great story for the positive side of capitalism, right? Like creating economic value, all the taxes that have been paid, all the jobs that have been created, all the artists that you've helped. Because a lot of people, when I talk to millennials coming up, they have sort of a negative view of capitalism and entrepreneurship. But when it's done ethically, and I get a real sense with you that you're a highly principled entrepreneur, not only can you become wealthy, but you can create so much good in the world. Did you want to just sort of speak to that for a moment? Like that might be a lot to take in, but that's kind of what I love about this story.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's really kind of you to frame it in such a way. It's funny. I'm a bit late to the party, but I was coming back from Europe last week. I'd been over there seeing some festivals that Vance Joy was playing, and I watched Silicon Valley for the first time, which I appreciate you guys have watched. It was really funny. And one of the things I thought was really funny, how they're always like, and we're making the world a better place, like that whole Silicon Valley thing. And it's like, I agree. I definitely think we've made a huge contribution. I think at the same time, I don't want to overstate it. But I think that the theme that I guess is interesting and it's a theme that I'm pretty obsessed with at the moment, is what is the future, right? Because when I started, I didn't ask what the future was. I was just like, hell yeah, music. This is awesome. Like I remember the first time we got on the ARIA charts, I read about it in the newspaper. Like as in like now we have like a login to ARIA and we know ARIA, like we're friends with the CEO of ARIA, like whereas back then we were so far out of the game that I had to like go on by the Herald Sun to see if we were in the ARIA charts. The point being is what you don't know is sometimes the best things, and just following something that you believe to be true. Obviously there needs to be some fact checking and some validation that it's worth following. But if you know too much, like Silicon Valley is great, but it's almost like you don't need to know all that stuff. I don't think you don't need to know about term sheets and down rounds and like I don't know, maybe that's bad advice, but sometimes I think we know too much is what I'm trying to get at. The future is unknown, but also I think that some parts of the world are benefiting from trying to make us think that the world's going to change a lot more than I think it's actually going to change. That's obviously a personal view. I think that, there's some people that will like to make you think that we won't listen to music created by humans in the future. I find that really hard to believe, in the same way that, I'm sure there will be. I always use the example of like, are we actually going to not go see Taylor Swift anymore or not go and see Fred again? Like, maybe once we'll go see the robot DJ because it'll be fun and a novelty, but are you actually going to go see the robot every night for the rest of your life? In the same way, are you only going to watch generated, like Gen AI films? Or like, I think that the future of technology is actually, it's more exciting than that. And I think that the future for people, for humans and human creativity, I think is only going to get even more exciting as we get access to more tools that allow us to become more efficient, so we don't have to do a whole bunch of the stuff that we've had to do for the last decade or more.
That's really, this is a really interesting subject, and I'd be curious to ask, like, what's like, like the best Black Mirror kind of idea that you may have seen or heard in the music industry that you think is an outside chance of possibly happening, where there's an intersection between perhaps AI and humans that's exciting in your space?
That's exciting. Well, like, I think that we, like even STL Tones, right from the beginning, a large part of it is utilizes artificial intelligence to help make these things happen faster. So that's the other thing about like AI. It's like, it's not actually that new, right? I'm sure, like, I don't know how much you guys go into tech. I presume you go into it a decent amount. Like, AI has been around for a long time. So is the blockchain, right? Like these things come into fashion and become so talked about that they become so over explained that I think people just get confused. But I guess for me, where AI could be great is helping more people make music. In the same way that the drum machine allowed people to make drum sounds without having a drum kit. So the ability for people to make music that might not have access to all the instruments or all the skills or all the networks can create music through apps and potentially publish that music to different platforms. Like, that is a really exciting opportunity to essentially help more people be creative and help more people output their creativity in a different way. I think that's an exciting opportunity, not just for the music business, but actually just for like humanity.
I saw some recent use of, is it Sora, the AI for video, and how that seems to be kind of a really natural fit for videos in certain genres of music. For example, EDM, right? It's not hard to imagine AI generated video clips for EDM type music as a starting point. And I think that's an interesting opportunity for where in the past you probably had these creative shops. I don't know if any of your companies do that, but make film clips or music clips. I don't even know how important music clips are anymore, but I would imagine that would be a whole big opportunity in and of itself, helping with the visual elements of the human created story and voice, and then telling the story visually through cutting edge AI. And I can see young people being like wrapped with that kind of idea that AI is sort of integrating. I don't know, just something that when I saw it, I thought it was a logical step.
It's a great example, and there could be some people that are impacted by that, i.e. the companies that make film clips. But there's also just an amazing pivot opportunity for them to start to embrace some of this technology, in the same way that elevated music, that in the past might have been created by a live band and recorded and then used in the elevator or on hold music. The future of that will potentially be created by the audio versions of Sora. And it's just about thinking creatively about how you can fit into that and how you can work with these platforms. There is definitely, like any evolution, there will be some winners and some losers, but I think, by and large, there'll just be more opportunity than anything.
Yeah, the Sphere in Vegas has just announced their first EDM concert that's going to happen there. That would be absolutely epic to be at, I reckon, in Vegas, to see what they do with that technology and space. And there'll be two industries that'll boom at that moment: music and ecstasy pills.
Oh, imagine being on MDMA in the Sphere.
Oh my God, to blow your head off. I'm changing topics just for a minute. I just want to ask, because we're getting to the end here, unless you guys had anything else.
Yeah, just on like from where you've come from, we've talked a fair bit about the rear vision mirror and where Unified is now. Cause it's essentially you're a capital allocator now. Is there any specific things you go after? Is there a piece of the checkerboard missing that you want to channel in on, or when opportunities come along, if it just seems to fit out of that music genre, okay, that's a great idea. So in other words, is it more of a strategic sort of a focus, or just music overall?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is both, because I think in one sense we're definitely getting a lot of inbound opportunities because people know what our strategy is, particularly from having conversations like this. So people are coming to us, but also we're also creating our own, launching our own businesses as well. So, once again, I didn't know what this meant when I started, but, the venture studio model is something that we are embracing in terms of we've got the resources in-house to launch our own businesses. That's what we did right at the back at the start. So we have a number of businesses at the moment that we're building internally that we'll be launching over the coming years. And there was a point where I was like, I wonder if there's any more businesses that we could launch. We've already got a marketing company, a record company, a management company, and then if I could show you my phone, you could see this. I've got a list of hundreds of ideas that we won't get to all of them, but we've got a lot to do if we want to, and I love talking to founders. Like if they're in music or close to music, I'll talk to anybody, because I just want to know what people are up to, so we can inspire each other and learn and see what the opportunity is.
Well, at the end, we'll grab the best way for people to reach you who fit that profile, and we might also ask, what's the most impressive thing you've seen in terms of the way people have approached you? How do they make an impact? But I'm just curious about one of the companies, which was QSIC, and I read this line about how you play in-store music in retailers that is guaranteed to increase sales. That's something that I've never actually thought about till I read it in the I think it was the Financial Review, that it's such an obvious one, right? Like, people are in the store, there's music playing. Is it as simple as you basically provide music to the store and then have embedded commercials and calls to action? Or is it that the music itself is somehow hypnotic and makes people pick shit up and buy it?
Buy me now.
Yeah. Buy me now. Ooh.
You need me in
how would you
your
describe
life?
that product? Like, what is that?
Is that Simpsons episode where they want everyone to join the Navy? Do you know that one?
No.
So QSIC is one of our businesses that's part of SideStage. It's invested in through SideStage, which is our VC fund. So essentially the way QSIC works is, it's a little bit of both. There's music the music is there to set the mood, essentially, that's in line with the brand of the store. So McDonald's is different to 7-Eleven, which is, different to Guzman and Gomez. Like it's all specific. But then there is direct audio ads as well in certain circumstances that help essentially drive call to action. And then plugging that in with the point of sale, it allows us to very easily show the customer, i.e. the store, but also the advertiser, the return on investment and all that sort of stuff. So it's a booming part of the world, which is retail media. It's probably not as talked about as AI or other sectors, but retail media is like becoming a really, really big thing because there's still a crazy amount of, like, I think I know you guys are in e-commerce, but I think there's a bit of a myth that like that's the only way people buy things. Like people still go to bricks and mortar stores way more than e-commerce, as you guys would know. And so the opportunity there is quite huge. And yeah, QSIC is based in the US. They're currently rolling out all the 7-Elevens in America, which is like tens of thousands of stores. And it's a really big opportunity. And for us, selfishly, it's an amazing opportunity for us to put our artists' music into those stores.
So there's sort of two layers there to that business, I'm guessing. Number one is you sign up the retailer, being 7-Eleven or Chemist Warehouse or whatever, and they pay, I'm just guessing. And then the actual brands that are sold in the store can buy airtime on the network that's playing across the nation. Is that kind of the model? And do you guys do those sales to the retailers the brands that are sold in the retail stores as well? Like, do you do both sales?
Yeah, it's different. We definitely do. Or QSIC does the first sale, and then the second sale is sort of different per store, based on like chain, like based on how they're sort of set up. But you're right in a broad sense that there's the two opportunities there.
That's such an interesting business. Just out of interest, like what sort of bump do they get in retail sales from audio? And like, what's a case study of like a brand that promoted their products on radio, and what did that translate to? Just as a ballpark, because this is actually one marketing strategy, and I pride myself on being a marketer I've never honestly even thought about. Yeah. That's one have you got any metrics that could just give us a broad brush kind of idea on that?
I probably couldn't and probably shouldn't, but I can basically say that it pretty much, in most cases, if not all cases, pays for itself.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
That's unreal. It's a great example of like when you're in a niche and you're in an industry, who would have thought you could, make money from music that way? And people forget how big the world is out there, and you're just remaining open. And sometimes I guess somebody just walks through your door, as they do ours, and you just say with an idea, and you're like, holy shit, that's actually just such a good use case that we've never thought of. That's probably a subject for a whole other pod, but I'd love to find out about like the first sale that was made in the musical, space of, selling stuff in stores. It's just such a interesting category.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the interesting takeaway from all of that for me, and I'll distinctly remember the moment when this all started. I'm sure other industries are like this, but the music industry is very much like, can sometimes be set in its ways, like this is just the way we do things, And so when I first started meeting a lot of these music tech founders back in 2018, they were often telling me things like this, like, hey, we can put the music in there and make money this way, or we can resell tickets in this certain way, or we can market in this way. And I remember my this is how we do it brain kicking in. Oh, what do these guys know? They've never signed a band, or they've never done this or that. And I'm so glad at that moment I was able to resist that urge and actually go, oh, tell me more. Can you explain this to me? Because this sounds really interesting, because that was probably what kick-started this whole journey to this point. And I think that for me, I'm just sort of reflecting on it in real time, but as far as takeaways from this, potentially for other people listening, it's like, just keep your mind open, because the opportunities, they're often hidden in plain sight, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the best ones often are. I mean, and we just got to train our mind to see them.
So
James,
just one last one from me. You're at 2024 with Unified. What's the next 5 years look like? What's the ultimate outcome for Unified? To keep it take it public, keep it private. What's the drive for you?
Yeah, definitely no ambitions to go public. Never say never, but yeah, there is not a single conversation that's been had about that. I really like, going back to how you introduced at the start, Adam, the family office vibe. Like, I'm not going to all of a sudden put that on our website, but it's sort of how I do think about the business. Like, I could go through all our businesses and add up the amount of people that work at the companies and say, oh, we've got this many people at Unified. But really more what I'm interested in is like building Unified as a smallish company that employs about 20 people that runs or has investments in all of these various companies and finds ways to support this ecosystem. So with that strategy, we can be as big or as small as we want to be, and we can make as little or as much money as we want to. But I do feel we're building quite a lot of momentum with the strategy, and more people are coming to us with their ideas. So I dare say the strategy is going to continue to grow, particularly as the financial model continues to, literally pay dividends. And if you've got a group of, 10, 20, 30 companies that are all profitable, all making money, like, it's no secret, but that's a pretty good business model that's going to only drive, pretty significant growth. So that's where I see it going. I'll try and run it for as long as I can. At some point, it'd be great for someone else to run it or to help me run it. I've got an amazing team. We haven't really touched on that too much, but I've got an amazing executive and leadership team that work with me on running the business. But yeah, I'm going to do it for as long as I love it. And that doesn't feel like it's anytime soon.
I got two selfish questions. One is, who's the most famous artist that you've ever met? And two, who's the coolest artist that you've ever got to hang with?
That's a great question. The most famous artist in the world is Taylor Swift, right? So I've met Taylor Swift. But like, I feel like kind of lame just even saying that. But we
Adam loves it.
Joy, one of our clients, he toured with Taylor Swift in 2015. So yeah, so I met Taylor then. She's a lot more famous than she was then, but she was still quite famous then. The coolest, it's a really good question. I'm not like I love hanging out with artists. Like, I spend most of the time hanging out with our artists. Like, I had this amazing experience last weekend. So Vance Joy, who I've mentioned a number of times, Melbourne boy, one of Australia's most successful music exports. Him and his wife and daughter live in Barcelona, in Spain. And so we were over there last weekend, my wife and I, Rachel, and we just had this awesome day. We went over to their place, went out for a drink, went out for dinner, watched the football. So we watched Spain win the World Cup. And it was just one of these cool moments. I remember waking up the next day and being like, oh, that was work.
Yeah.
Technically, and I don't know if you've ever seen any interviews with Vance or seen him play. He's just the nicest guy. He's just so real. He's worked so hard. He's created such incredible music and so many incredible memories for people. Yeah, I don't know. That was just maybe you're looking for a bit more of a crazy story.
I wouldn't. That's off the pod, those questions.
Yeah, it's just such a cool. Yeah, it was a real reminder of how, you sort of were, very kindly sort of summarized some of your ideas on our business before, Adam. But for me, just huge amount of gratitude to be okay, I've spent 22 years working my absolute butt off, and that's the result. That's a pretty awesome result to be able to be in this awesome city with these great people, having these great conversations, and just being this is cool.
Good on you, man.
Yeah, I get a lot of joy from those things in my business life of seeing businesses that you've backed and people's lives that have been changed. Far more joy from that than anything else. When I go, we've got a portfolio company that makes retro caravans. And when we go down to their factories and we see young guys that are in their first job, that are sort of, there's no apprenticeship in that industry, but seeing them got their first job and love doing what they're doing and assembling kitchens and putting things together and panels arriving, it feels good to actually have that in the portfolio. It doesn't matter what it really makes at this point. The fact that people are being employed and it's making a profit of any kind, it's not going backwards, is so fulfilling and rewarding. And I think what you've done is you've built a family office that feels like it probably has a family vibe to it around a heart-centered industry, and you're bringing good to an otherwise sort of disparaged sort of space that can be, so easily attract the wrong types of people. And it's just, and I love that Aussie feel to it, that grounded vibe. I'm just curious, last question I have was the picture behind you. Is there any significance to that in your office? Is that like drawn by one of your kids or anything like that?
I don't have any kids, or not ones with two legs. We have a cat and a dog. No, this is Mercamora, who's like very, very famous Australian painter. She sadly passed away about 5 years ago. Her studio was just on the same block as us here in Richmond, in Melbourne. So yeah, just a really famous artist. My mum, who also passed away last year, she was a huge fan of Mercamora, and I don't know. She just was like, "Hey, Merca's selling some paintings. You should buy one." And I was just kind of like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." And yeah, it just kind of hangs there as a memory of, I don't know, creativity, local Australian artists, and it just also reminds me of my mum, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. It's it's got a nice vibe to it. I've just been looking at it a little bit while you were talking throughout. It's just got a real sense of contentment and good vibes coming from that painting. So, yeah. Awesome. Jaddan, it's been a joy, mate. I always love talking to entrepreneurs, and I love talking to creative entrepreneurs, particularly who didn't have the sort of, having spreadsheets fed to them at the dinner table, but just really followed their heart and have just stuck at it and built something special. And I'm 50, and I just think about where you are at 40, and I think add another 10 years to what you're doing there, and I think you will even be surprised of how far you'll go with that. It's really exciting because you've got a 20 years of compounded experience, and that experience and the power of compounding is going to really pay off even bigger. So I just can't wait to see what happens with Unified and all the people that are going to be touched by what you're doing. So thank you for joining us, mate. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be at one of your shows at some point in the future.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time and all your kind words. It's great to connect with such great people, and looking forward to hopefully hanging out at a gig at some point in the not too distant future.
Last thing is, how do people who may be in this space that go, man, I'd love to be part of the Unified family. I've got something related to music. I would love to work with you. What's the best way for them to reach out, and what should they prepare in order to sort of present something to you? How do you like it best?
I think LinkedIn's probably best. It's easy to find me there, and you can message me pretty easily, and I'll respond if it's not just like a sales thing. No disrespect to sales people, but I just don't need to respond to that. But if you've got an idea, just tell me about it. Include a couple of links. Let me know what problem you're solving. What your passion is. And then, I'll check it out.
Love it. Easy. Jaddan, thanks so much. And we appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.